Gaining, growing, and retaining great employees is such an important part of organisation success now, as it has always been. All of our world's leading organisations, from restaurants to technology companies, are highly focused in this area. The problem comes if we're not. The result of lower capability in the area of gaining, growing, and retaining great employees is that we have disengaged employees, people under pressure trying to keep up, many problems being solved slowly, if not at all, or poorly. I'm so pleased to bring Natal Dank back on the show with us today to talk about a new book, Agile L and D, that provides us knowledge and insights to help navigate these issues and improve our capabilities in enhancing our employees' experience and journey and skills. It is truly a show to help solve the largest problems we face now and will do into the future. To help, we've loaded an employee experience or journey mapping template onto the Enterprise Excellence podcast download page to give you additional guidance on how to go about a process like this. Let's get to the episode.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence podcast, where we aim to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve and create enduring, high-performance, low-impact enterprises. Learn how to enhance morale, customer and purpose centricity, focus, and calmness. Learn how to create and sustain a culture of excellence at all levels of your organisation.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet.
Welcome to episode 173 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast.
It is such a pleasure to have Natal Dank back on the show with us today. Natal was on the podcast with us previously, back on episode 122, discussing her award-winning book, Agile HR. Natal is a leader in the field of leading and improving organisations' agility culturally. Today we'll be discussing her upcoming book, Agile L and D, the new Organisational Playbook. Let's get into the episode. Natal, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to do it in the same time zone.
Yeah, you being out in Australia now, it's wonderful. Hey, yes. Natal, what have you been up to since we last caught up? Like, what have you been working on since way back a year or two ago in episode 122?
Well, I think because I've just come out of a writing episode, that's all I can remember. I feel like all I've done in all my life is write at the moment because the 2023 was writing this second book, which, as you know, is an all-consuming task. And it was one where all these things happened more in my personal life to essentially, just bring up challenge after challenge after challenge, which made it extremely hard. So I've got through all that, and I'm very happy to now be into 2024, and I can get back to things that I love to do, which is more around working with, HR leaders and teams around how they evolve their ways of working. So definitely kept that going, but all I can think of at the moment is that I sat in a room writing.
Well, good on you for getting it done, because writing a book is not an easy task, let alone when you've got other crises and challenges going on around you.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
Well done.
Though it was a nice example of dealing with complexity and needing a agile mindset and a continuously improving mindset to get yourself through it. Yeah.
Well done. So, Natal, what led you to write the book Agile L and D, particularly after you've written the book Agile HR?
I know, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So there's a few angles around it. First of all, I was approached by my publisher, which always sparks your interest. And they had received a lot of requests for a book that was looking at how do you apply agility in the world of learning and development. So that got me interested as to what is the angle there? Why are people seeking that? And there's a couple of elements. One is that it's an absolute no-brainer. So when you come to everything that sits in learning and development, and also I cover what is often called OD, which is organizational development, and that to be honest, can cover everything from culture change to performance to, designing, workplace structures. So what everyone that works in that area, they're essentially solving complex problems and creating products for the organization, and it's just ripe for agile disruption, and it has been for some time. I actually came originally from the world of learning and development prior to sort of being more HR as such, and so it was almost a sort of an ode to my younger self and my leading learning and development teams, knowing what I know now and how how I could create so much more value if I applied my knowledge that I have now to that. And then learning and development is not always HR. So it can actually sit separately to human resources. Sometimes it doesn't even have a connection back in. So when I started my career in sort of the more of the HR world, I actually started in learning and sort of trainer and coaching roles in business teams. I didn't sit with HR at all. I had no kind of connection to human resources. And so when I first sat in a HR team, I was quite shocked to be asked about payroll and grievances and all of these things. I just didn't even compute that I was sort of now in that world. And of course, over time, I realized it's all interconnected and you need to kind of approach the whole thing to do people strategy. But so for me, there was a lot of reasons to speak more directly to people sitting in learning and development and organizational development. And then also the sort of the final part, and this is what sort of the book covers a lot, is some of the really big business challenges that organizations face sit a lot primarily in the domain of learning and development and organizational development. So things like rapidly reskilling, upskilling, and finding the right skills for your organization, and related to that, dealing with AI, and how do you kind of bring that into the organization? How do you get the right skills, the right mindset, the right kind of approach? And then helping organizations transform around net zero and climate change. All of those require a lot of the skill set that would traditionally sit in an L&D OD team. So I thought, right, this is needed. And then I just saw it as a great opportunity to present some of my more recent thinking. So yeah.
It's great. I love it, Natal, because when you think of an agile organization, to me, it's like that constant learning organization, isn't it? And it's like, how fast can we learn from customers, from employees, from those we serve, and use that to adapt and improve? Like, it's just such a pivotal part of it, isn't it? It's like there's a decision latency thing, but also a learning latency thing. How quick can we learn and grow?
Definitely. And I think if you think about what makes a successful organization, it's the ability to truly collaborate in a multi-skilled, almost multidisciplinary way and solve complex problems together. And to build in an environment like that, you need some of the skill set that comes from learning and development. But interestingly, again, traditional learning and development models probably were notoriously top down, creating programs in sort of the numerous leadership development programs or, technical skills programs created in isolation, bunched based on some just initial requirements or learning, what we often call learning skills analysis, and then sort of designed end to end and then rolled out big bang. Everyone, there's even still today, you can get learning programs that are mandatory across an organization. It's sort of, so for me, there was still a lot of traditional ways of working that we needed to question and look at and help teams modernize their approach. And that all for me was very related to applying an agile mindset.
I love it, Natal. I'm looking forward to this conversation on that, particularly the traditional mass rollout training type approach versus what you're going to talk about. Let's go into that. Natal, what are the key topics of the book that exposes how do we build agility and L&D within our organization?
Yeah. Yeah, so I decided to base it on five design principles, and I'm calling the new playbook. And the principles reflect essentially everything I've learned up until now, and sort of an updating of my thinking since the Agile HR book. But it's also about how do you solve business challenges in a kind of, in today's complex environment. So the five principles are, the first one is working product led. So which you'll appreciate is a big kind of focus area across all organizations. So it's sort of the moving on from just the customer experience, it's building this whole end-to-end product experience through your organization. And so I take that concept and I put it into the world of people, and I am arguing that the people experience or the employee experience is our product, and it's made up of multiple component parts, from recruitment to onboarding to career development to even how people leave your organization, and you keep in touch. And to be able to understand that product, you've got to work in a much more multi-skilled way. You've got to understand the right delivery model, but also product value is realized by solving problems. So your employee experience product needs to solve problems and help people get the job done. So once you start taking that mindset in, you can start to think about, well, what value am I delivering? How do I measure that value? How do I know that I'm solving a problem? And how do I track that over time? And that's a very different mindset in how to design learning solutions that we've traditionally had. So the first one is product led. The second one is human centered design, of course. And probably more than ever, I see what would be known as sort of more agile project management interconnected with design thinking to be successful in the people space. And so this is taking the philosophy of human-centered design and then showing people how do you use that concept of understanding your people and understanding the problems that they're dealing with to then design the right user-centric solutions. So product-led, human-centered design. Then, of course, experimentation. So I focus a lot more on how do you build and run experiments in the people area. And that includes writing a decent hypothesis and knowing how to test things. Then the next one is T-shaped people in T-shaped teams. We can talk a bit more about that. But I've used this framework now for a number of years, and it seems to be quite groundbreaking for HR teams or people teams, and well as for the wider organization. But as you know, T-shape is about having multi-skilled or multidisciplinary people and teams. So I focus a lot about that, and I actually look at a few case studies of clients I've worked with that have actually transformed not just their learning teams, but their whole people teams to be T-shaped and
Love it.
and deliver people products. So that relates to the first one. Exactly. So, and then the final one is deliver with impact. So this is more about how do you use the agile cycle to understand the rhythm of solving problems, delivering value, measuring your impact across the organization. So we look a lot from how do you design strategy around learning and OD through to how do you measure your ongoing value delivery.
Wow, they are some cool topics to cover in there, Natal. So you're looking at the working product-led, human-centered design, experimentation,
Yeah.
T-shaped people and teams. I love how you've called out the T-shaped in both factors there, because typically we just say T-shaped, don't we? But I think it's wonderful calling it out for people and teams, and then deliver with impact. Now, we go back to working product-led. And in your language there, I was picturing like really being clear on the employee journey. So like the employee personas that we're hiring the employee, considering that journey. Am I correct in that thinking there, where it's about working product led, which is based on how do we crank up that employee journey and as they go along?
Yeah, totally. So it's basically seeing that employee journey, or what we often term the employee experience these days, as your product. And the reason why that's a kind of more modern view is that up until now, people teams, and particularly learning and development teams, actually, we've worked in a lot of skill silos within our domain. So the recruitment team looks after recruitment. The learning team looks after the learning and development programs. The talent team looks after things like succession and understanding how do you build, future leaders. Your reward team looks after pay and benefits and bonus structures and things like this, and how do you recognize people. But as you can appreciate, to deliver a product, you need to understand how all those different skill sets and topics all build, relate and flow into that whole overriding experience. If you speak to somebody in a work environment, they don't differentiate at getting paid to doing the learning program. For them, that's all part of the overriding people experience. And so we've got to get better at understanding that holistic approach. And as you know, when you have that product approach to what you're delivering, you're then monitoring, okay, there's all these different kind of products and services that then sit into that overriding product experience. What's working well? What's not working so well? What do we need to kill off? What do we need to innovate? And so once you start thinking like that, you're thinking about your whole function, delivering a product out. You're trying to work, you need to work together. You need to have a delivery model. What have we delivered? What do we maintain? How do we track what's working? And then you also need to work in a more T-shaped, multi-skilled way. So for me, it has a lot of implications as to how you set yourself up and deliver value across the organization. And then one other part is that a lot of organizations I've been working with, the concept of building a go-to market strategy that is product-led has just been so central to a lot of business strategies that I thought, well, we should be, applying the same concept in the people area. So yeah, that's why I feel like it's quite an important approach to take.
That's awesome. And so, thinking about, this whole concept of the employee experience, I reflect on, I see customer journey mapping or customer experience mapping and these small teams and this real strategic focus on that done all the time. And then we've had Cheryl Jaquiel and others on talking about employee journey mapping or employee experience mapping and really getting centric on that. But at the moment, at least in Australia, it doesn't seem to be the focal point, even though our biggest problem at the moment for many leaders is gaining and retaining employees. So I think there's a massive opportunity there for us to think into that employee experience and focus on the working product led within that.
Yes,
because it is the biggest problem right now.
There is. It is, and that's why I saw that writing this book was so essential, because if you start solving some of those business challenges in that people area, which, as you said, is why should someone come and work for this organization, and then why should they keep signing up and giving their best work for this organization? And to do that, you need, so there's another book out at the moment by a lady called Jessica Swam, and she likened the employee experience to a subscription product. So you subscribe to work at, you say, okay, I'd like to give my life, because you give part of your life over to an organization for a period of time. I want something back for that. I want to be developed. I want to feel engaged. I want to have a great relationship with my team. I want to feel like I've got impact on the end customer. And so we've got to create a subscription model that people want to keep coming back to. So I kind of like that example as well. But there's a lot in the, I suppose, people and culture profession. There's a lot going on at the moment around moving away from this very teams of individual topic owners through to being a much more collective, strategic team that thinks about business challenge after business challenge. So rather than going, okay, we need to get a few, to go and find people for these particular roles, what is the overriding business challenge? The overriding business challenge probably is that we lack these kind of skills in our organization at the moment. So how do we know where to get them, or how do we upskill them internally, or who could move into those roles? How do we even know the skills in the roles, across the organization in the first place? So having that much more organizationally wide view of business challenge, and then prioritize, okay, let's solve that first, and then try and move on to the next challenge and the next challenge, as opposed to kind of doing these very piecemeal approaches to, it ended up being a little bit too scattergun, I think, in the past, and
Yes.
solving smaller issues and missing out on the bigger picture of how do you really shift the dial in the organization. So I think working product led helps people lift up and understand that from a different perspective. Yeah.
It's really cool. And I'm guessing too, Natal, it's a simple focus. If we've done customer journey or experience mapping before and really focused there, it's like you're just looking at the employees as your customer, aren't you? And you're going, right, well, how do we create that subscription model and that journey for them to really engage? And through that, a bit like the Richard Branson approach, isn't it? Like, just create an insanely amazing culture, and then you're going to get insanely amazing outcomes for customers from that.
Exactly. But also the like what I've got quite into was looking at the concept of how product management is sort of becoming an interesting space. And we can get quite agile geeky, but even this shift of people debating product owner versus product manager and all this kind of, but actually what it's looking at is that what is it to build a product? It has to be more than just building something that based on requirements. You have to understand your customer and the problems you're solving. What does your product do for that customer? And then how is your product bringing people back to your organization, creating that loyalty, creating that people recommending you to other customers, upselling to other products. And all of those concepts relates directly to the people experience or the employee experience of an organization. You want people to want to come to work. You want them to recommend the place to people they know and work with. You want them to want to give their whole self and a lot of, their best work every day. Some of their best ideas, you want them to give that to you. So you need to create, a delightful product that they want to kind of be part of. Yeah.
Yeah, too true. I love it, Natal. I think it's definitely something I think is going to crank up a lot more in the future, even for myself, is that whole side is so important. Natal, I'm keen to chat to you on point 2 now. So human-centered design. And you're mentioning there really, yes, understanding your people and the problems, but design thinking coming into the process. Do you mind describing to our listeners design thinking and how that applies into human-centered design?
Yeah, sure. So the way I kind of describe it is that human-centered design is more the philosophy. So more the mindset that you of approaching problem solving, and that's the mindset is that if you understand problems from the human perspective, or what we would know as the customer or user perspective, then you're better able to design the right solutions and design it in a way that will help them essentially either live a better life or be able to get the job done better, or help them kind of be delighted and want to use that product over and over again. So it's sort of and the human-centered design philosophy can be applied to social issues just as much as a commercial environment. The tools of bringing human-centered design to life is essentially design thinking. And the reason it's good to differentiate is that you can apply a lot of design thinking tools and not truly step into the human experience, and also not be conscious of maybe what your product is then doing. So more and more in the world, we need to design products that are good for our planet, just as good as for our end customer, or make profit. So you need a mindset of how to do that. It can't just be about designing something that is aesthetically pleasing. You need to design something that's actually going to, dispose properly, or, solve a real problem, or be more sustainable in its lifetime. So I kind of show people how, first of all, it's about having that mindset of stepping into the human experience, and in a work environment that, as you said, is the employee journey. What are the touch points? What are the pain points that people have in that journey and that life cycle? And then how do we co-create the way that we design the solution? So that's involving them from the prototyping and testing stage through to how do we actually implement it into the organization. Also a big
that's
thing
great.
is, yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, also in people, we always jump to the solution, and actually a lot of people give you the solution. So if you speak to leaders, they'll say, oh, we need training in this area because this team's not working well together. Where actually, as you know, once you dig into it, it's often quite a different issue and needs a different solution. And of course, that model helps you do that.
Yeah, getting to the actual root cause of the situation,
Yes.
not opinion. Yeah. Natal, you mentioned, I love the conversation about, even human-centered design now. We need to be thinking of the broader picture, the planet, the society, and of course,
Yes.
profit and people. And I've come across recently a book called Both and Thinking by Wendy Smith and Marianne Lewis, where they're talking about how it used to be a bit more like this or that, but now it's like, no, well, how do we get both? Or how do we have that and that?
Yes.
And I could hear that in your language very much in human-centered design. It's having that language of, okay,
Yes.
well, how do we get both? And how do we run down that tension of both? Which
Yes,
is often
exactly.
many win-wins, isn't there? But there can be tension at the same time.
Definitely. And look, I think the tradition of people and culture is that complex tension of how do we make decisions for it's often to save costs or create more profit, as well as how do we make decisions that engage our people and make them part of that solution. And so still to this day, I often have big discussions with people leaders around how do you do any kind of restructuring or downsizing or designing teams in a way that is human centric and meet some of the profit needs that you have as an organization. And I don't think that has to be an one or the other. It should be both. And that's what I mean by human-centered design. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it? HR's been running that gauntlet forever. So it's not a new thing in business. It's just it's somewhat new in some regards, where we start to consider the planet in a stronger position in a lot of companies.
Definitely.
Not all companies, of course, but a lot of companies and society. Natal, you mentioned experimentation and running experiments around this human-centered approach and the whole working product around our employee experience. How do you go about that in relation to creating a hypothesis, but actually then running an experiment where it touches our employees? That can be a little bit, I don't know, some people might see it as dangerous, but can you explain how do you go about this in a really good way?
Sure. Well, everything that we do has an underlying hypothesis. So you're always, even if it's a learning program, your basic hypothesis is that if you run this program, people will learn particular skills and be able to go and do something as a result of those skills. So you've got to try and get some evidence as to why this particular program and the way that you've designed it and the way that you're going to run it is going to meet those outcomes. So what I help people understand is actually by presenting it as a hypothesis, people are more open to the idea of even, well, how do we test this? How do we take a more of a kind of scientific approach? And they're actually more open to the idea of being involved and being part of that experiment, because there's a lot of assumption and opinion at play in organizations, and you need to kind of move beyond that. Also, there is too much sort of this is how we did it last time, or this worked over here. And you've always got to test it for your particular context, your particular values, your people, to understand if it is the right thing to do. So just kind of getting into that kind of space, and then helping people write an actual hypothesis, which is a challenge in itself, because it's a slightly different language to, I think, what we've used in people and culture before. But also, how do you test something really cheaply and cheerful before you even get to the stage that you're running a 3-month pilot? And actually, on that, even knowing the difference between a pilot and an experiment. So an experiment is that you can fail, and you can fail pretty cheaply, and it's not much, embarrassment or time and energy. Where if you're got to the stage where you're running a 3-month pilot, really you're now into full kind of MVP mode. You've done several prototypes. You're quite confident that this is going to work. And now you're investing the time and the money and the maybe the vendor contract. But you don't want to do that unless you've got some evidence that that's the right thing to do. So a good example would be a team that was solving a career development issue. They saw that possibly it was about that people couldn't find, there was career opportunities in this organization, but people couldn't find them. They didn't know how to get the next job. So they had this idea around building a website that would be like a marketplace where people could find jobs and apply. And they even thought, oh, maybe they could combine their LinkedIn profile with the website. And, wouldn't this be amazing? And look, we have these kind of things happen all the time in organizations. But they thought, okay, well, how do we get evidence that even pursuing that is worth it? And so they mocked it up on cardboard, and they sat down with employees and actually, set up what it would be like. Okay, this has just landed in your inbox. What would you do next? Oh yeah, I'd click on that. Okay, this now landing page is appearing on your screen. What would you do next? Oh yeah, I'd click on this. And people were even touching the piece of paper, the cardboard. And then okay, it's asking you to connect your LinkedIn profile. Oh, no, I don't think I'd do that. Oh, okay, why wouldn't you? And so they did a series of those tests with people that were a target audience, people that had this problem more, or certain types of, different gender, different backgrounds, different abilities. And it was only based on getting enough data that people had a high intent to use this, that most people were willing to click and to connect their LinkedIn profile. Did they then move to the next experiment, which was get 1,000 licenses for this tech that seemed to equate to what they wanted, and run that for 3 months in the business and see what happens. So for me, it's helping teams understand that sequence. Don't go to your senior leader and ask for the big budget unless you've got some data already about why it's going to work, and how to implement it, and the evidence of moving forward. So so that's kind of how I talk people through approaching experiment.
I love it. That's so cool. Especially too, I love that, like you and I know that Agile is built a lot around the PDCA cycle, the old scientific thinking cycle and the OODA loop. But when you think plan, do, check, act from a scientific point of view, what is plan? It's about formal hypothesis, so it's built into the foundation of it all, isn't it? But I love that concept of how can I just run a rapid experiment to learn, and from there I can then choose what the next experiment is, or the path forward. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Natal, the next point, number 4 on your book, is the T-shaped people and T-shaped teams. Now, for people out there listening where they haven't heard about T-shaped people and T-shaped teams, do you mind just explaining? Because it's a very important topic, isn't it, when it comes to getting true great performance and agility?
Yeah. So a T-shape is a framework that looks at how do you I call it, how do you be the full stack? So it's based on the idea of the vertical is specialisms or a specialist skill. And then your horizontal is your general capability. So if you look at that for an individual, it's thinking about what general capabilities do you need for your role, for where your organization is at, or even just thinking about how do you stay relevant and up to date with what's going on in the world. So a general capability is you're not the expert, but you can definitely, talk to that topic. You can contribute to a project in that topic. Or maybe that is a skill that helps you with relationships or communication or kind of consulting across a business. Then everyone's going to have, one or maybe a few deep specialisms. And this is where you are the expert, where you are the thought leader, where you can really lead a project group based on this topic. Now, I find that T-shaped model, it really helps people with the concept of a modern career, because we need to move beyond just job roles and functions and start thinking about how do I combine different skill sets based on the role that I'm in at any one point of time. And it also allows you to be a bit more strategic about how you develop your career. So generally your skills your deep skills are going to be more preferences, backgrounds, where you want to spend more time in education or kind of, really deepening your field. But your general capabilities are just as crucial. So these days, I would say everyone needs to have some people analytics or data analytics in their general capabilities. They probably now need to have a bit of AI. What is AI? How do I write a prompt? How do I analyze data that's coming out of any kind of AI system? How do I ask the right questions? Another general capability for a lot of people is, project management. We would put agility in there, of course, those kind of things. So you can start to get a bit more strategic about how do you make sure you've got the right general capabilities to move across all kinds of roles in an organization and also contribute to multiple projects. And then what are the deep specialisms where you want to bring that kind of thought leadership to particular things you work on. If you then combine everyone's T into a team, then that gets really interesting, because now you start thinking about what is the right combination of T-shaped people to have a really powerful multi-disciplined team. And in the world of Agile, of course, we argue that if you've got T-shaped teams, they can take on nearly every task you throw at them. And you've got the ability to constantly cross-train. You've got the ability for the whole team to deliver rather than just being these one people dependencies within the team. And you can take business challenge after business challenge, as opposed to, oh no, we only work on this particular product at this particular time in this particular way. So it gives you depth throughout an organization if you can build T-shaped teams.
It's awesome.
Exactly. You can have that product-led approach as well, can't you? So
yeah. And I once had Jeff Sutherland say to me that really hit home. T-shaped teams, you need to look at your vision and goals, and the vision and goal for that team, and look at who they're serving, who's their customer, and what are they serving, and then form your team, your T-shape based on that. So what capabilities, depth do I need in there, and what lesser spread do I need in that team? Now, to me, that was just beauty. I was like, far out. That's it. That's it. That's how you get agility, because decision latency just gets lost. You got rapid speed of knowledge. You get teamwork where they start to cross skill and all that. It's wonderful. It's one of the areas that I find most organizations struggle with, is truly thinking that way versus breaking out of silo thinking. I'm going to put people in nice little boxes because it's neat and it's the way we've done it. What have you experienced in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're at a bit of a crossroad moment in how you do organizational design. So for a while now, we've had big discussions around how do you move to more a skills-based model of, as you said, bring people together based on what's the problem to solve or the product to deliver. And this, it should be the ability to scale up and down at pace based on what your organization needs. That's been sort of the ideal, the mecca for a while now around organizational design. But most organizations are still very much based on jobs and functions. So I do this job and this is my job description, and then I contribute to this function that looks after these, this remit and these responsibilities. So, and as you've probably experienced many times, when you bring agility into an organization, you're trying to actually break that down, because often you want to bring people together in across functions or across jobs as we call them, and bring them together maybe for a temporary time to then run a design sprint or some or do some kind of experimentations, or actually run a kind of more innovative part of the business. But I think all industries are now understanding how do they bring that flexible workplace structure and planning into their organization. But I think up until now, people have lacked a framework to help them move people around in that way. And I'm just finding that the T-shape, when I bring that into teams and organizations, it seems to really resonate. People because you've got to find a framework that an individual thinks, yes, I can develop my career this way. I could see the benefits, as well as, okay, now we've got a framework on how we can build teams. So that's why I've landed on the T-shape as a kind of a way to do that.
It's
and
great.
as an example, as an example, there's an innovation team, a HR innovation team at the big company called Diageo, and they actually use the T-shape to understand the skill set in that. Okay, what specialisms do I have? What general capabilities do we all need to be able to work across multiple problems? And then they have a traffic light. So what's green, because we've got it in the team, what's amber because we're developing it, and what's red because we lack that skill set at the moment. So I think it's a really interesting model to use. Yeah,
the old visual skills matrix. I had a chap called Adam Stars develop a wonderful one of those just in Excel once, and it's amazing what that can do when you add that to a Scrum board or your transparent board. It really helps drive that forward. Natal, one question I've got is I had Dr. John Cotter on the podcast, and I know Jeff Sutherland talks about dual operating model before. Have you come across John's dual operating model, where you've got this temporary project teams or even stable, where people are drawn by, what is it? It's not they're forced into it, it's by opt-in. And then you have the standard business. And then above it, but it's critical, there are some sort of guiding coalition or some sort of team, executive action team, or some sort of guiding position that actually helps coordinate the two. Have you seen that model? Have you got thoughts on that model?
Yeah, so it's more and more common when organizations attempt to either bring in some kind of business agility, or look at how did they try and shift their operating model to more of a innovative product design. So you've even got some companies that go and create a second some of the car companies are an interesting example. They've gone and created a second company, and that second company is the more innovative electric car designing company, because they've realized that the operating model and the mindset of the existing company is not going to move fast enough, and actually is to set on those kind of jobs and function structure that we've talked about. So for me, this is increasingly common. I think it throws up, there's pros and cons, isn't there? Of how do you not create an us and them? How do you create that, what you're talking about, that kind of governing, structure around it, of helping people understand why you might be operating in certain ways on either side, and how do they then combine back together? I also think at some stage, either you're not going to be the two, at some stage, either you want to bring this together and all the organization operates in this new way, or, because it's unrealistic to continue to be two entities in one. So I think it's a nice way to bring agility in. And you see that even on a very basic level, where, certain teams they go, okay, well, part of our team is going to look at certain projects, and we're going to apply an agile approach there and see what that's like, and then build it up over time. So it's always often the model on how you bring business agility in, but it has I think it has a lifespan that you need to have plans from the word go of how you're going to help the whole organization move forward, rather than just continue operating in this dual way.
Yeah, because you're right. Because the thinking, in essence, can be applied to the whole organizational structure. Because when you start thinking of, who do we serve? Who's the customer? What's the vision and goals? And how do we form teams based on that? You get a totally different outcome than the traditional old silo type of structure. Like
Yes,
typically every
exactly.
time. I don't think there's
Yeah.
ever a case I've seen where it's like, no, the way we should do it is build silos based on skill sets.
No,
I don't think I've come across that
exactly.
yet, but for some reason we do. Hey, Natal, you mentioned delivering with impact as your fifth point in the book. And it's
Mm.
how do you use Agile in the cycle to really solve problems, but then to keep getting that feedback loop and constant
Mhm.
learning and measuring progress? Do you mind explaining to the listeners that final point of delivering with impact ongoing, I guess, is the concept here?
Yeah, so it's sort of the final principle because it's about bringing everything together to then deliver your people experience product across the organization. Um, but it's also for me that is so I'm as you already know, I'm a bit of a so I'll just pull on different agile techniques based on what is right for that team, for that organization. It's about creating your toolkit. So I don't necessarily push one particular framework onto any team. And what I've found is talking it more about an agile cycle of plan, do, review, adapt really helps people connect with the kind of the central ethos of agile, of that incremental delivery, the idea of how do you know what's the value? How do you measure, decide what to work on at the start of that cycle? How do you go and get some work done and then use that to then reflect on how did it go? And do we keep going in the same direction or do we pivot? Um, and I think you can do a lot of that without having to mention the word Scrum and Kanban and all that kind of stuff, because
Sprint
that can start
review,
to, yeah,
sprint
sprint
review and
reviews, all
retro.
those things. Exactly. Yeah. So I try and keep it more around, I suppose, a value delivery model. How do you, and this connects back to the T-shaped team. So up until I think, what's kind of held a lot of people and culture teams and learning and development teams back is that because we've often done this just within our skill silo. So the learning and development team does it themselves, or the recruitment team, and we're not going, okay, what's all the work across the whole people and culture function? How does that all go out to the organization? And how do we know that we're working on the right things? And how do we know that, or based out of this portfolio of products and services, is there anything that we need to change, do different, remove, etc.? And when do they go out? How do they get released across the business? Because we've all been in businesses where the HR team asks you to do 5 different things just in the 1 week, and it feels like it's always on top of your job as opposed to part of it. So the cycle really helps. And so and this is probably where I spend the most time working with people teams now, is helping them visualize all their work across as a portfolio. And that might be a function of several hundred people or just a small team of, say, 20, 10 people. And then using that portfolio approach, it's kind of, I suppose, a scaled model for people and culture teams. So, okay, every quarter, what are we going after and why? What is the big topics to solve? And this will be something like, okay, we need to acquire or develop AI skills in the organization. We need to do it for this particular product team. Okay, what does that look like? And how do we know that that's more important than this other problem that's come up that we need to solve for? So making some of that decision of prioritization at the start, and then thinking about as a whole function, how do we now solve that problem at a rapidly, prototype, test, understand what's the evidence, when is it going to get released, and when does that should that get released now compared to this other thing that we've already worked on and is out there. Also, like what a business looks at, every product you create has to go somewhere. So it has to either be managed or looked after, or or people have to use it in the organization. So is it digitally enabled, or does it create more admin for people? And who's going to actually look after that product? So this is for people and culture teams, understanding that sort of relationship between product development and design, and of course what you might call operations or DevOps in an organization. So now with that cycle, generally I work with teams around doing a kind of very real-time adaptive strategy, at least on a quarterly basis, and then a monthly cycle where the whole function decides, what are we going after? What are we actually delivering this month? Let's go and do it. Now let's look at, was it successful? What does the product look like? How do we work as a team? All right, what adaptation do we need to make to this plan? Let's go again. And it sounds quite simple, but it's actually quite groundbreaking for a lot of people teams I work with.
Natal, I'm with you. Like when it comes to me working on enterprise excellence with an organization, that strategic and cultural planning and execution drumbeat, that quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily drumbeat.
Yes.
It's so critical that it's connected from the top to the people and culture, into the teams, down into operations, into the factory, however your structure is. But if we can't get knowing that well, man, it's hard to really help them form true, proper agility. It's a critical one. Like I can understand why you're working so much in that space, because I'm with you. I'm like, that is that, and the right leadership behaviors to me to help the other bits you've spoken about are just paramount.
Yes, exactly. And it's about having that, because everyone is overwhelmed and burnt out because there's so much to do, and we live in a world that's digital and complex and forever changing. And in that environment, you've got to have that, as you said, that rhythm, that cadence. You've got to make choices. You can't do it all. And you also need to do it as a true team, because if you're all just falling back to being individuals and getting things done, you're just going to constantly feel so overworked. You're reinventing the wheel. You're not going to move anything forward. And you can't solve complex business challenges working individually or even working in smaller teams. You have to, have that true whole product view. So I think it's a kind of an essential model, not just for a people and culture function, but as you said, for a business. If you're going to be able to ruthlessly prioritize and know you're going after the right things, you've got to have that whole view of work and what choices you're making around where to spend your time.
Yeah. And I think, Natal, what I'd say to listeners is that there's two other outcomes you'll have going. One, you're forming a strategic plan as a business or a department, and then you're just doing stuff throughout the year and really you don't look at it too much. That's one outcome. The other one is you're forming a strategic plan, but when you get into your cadence of meetings, you're really just talking about what's happened. You're not actually planning that short-term vision and goals and prioritizing projects and works based on capacities and priorities and what you know. And so that's the two things I see in companies. One, either we just got this free-for-all type plan, or we're really spending most of our time talking about what's happened and promoting what's happened rather than actually prioritizing forward. Do you agree with that? Do you see that a fair bit?
Yeah, definitely. And two other things I'd add to that. One, that it leads to this outcome of tracking activity as opposed to value and outcomes. So we did all this work, or we made all these things,
measures.
or exactly. And that becomes how we measure value. But actually measuring value is knowing if we solve the problem that we set out to achieve, or, and you can only do that by truly going up, setting that strategy and then going through that cycle to understand, okay, what's the data at any stage that we are truly fixing this problem. Then the other one for me is that, and this is very big in people and culture, and I know other functions suffer from this as well, is we spent all this time in the strategy session talking about all these great projects that we need to do and these great things that we need to design, and what we're going to do to, we're going to do this amazing talent exercise, and we're going to do a big leadership development program. And so we talk about all these great big things that we're going to do. And then or wellness. We're going to go and make everyone feel happy and well across the organization. So they're huge, big, vague topics to begin with, and we don't break them down into, well, what are we really going to do to actually achieve that outcome?
In
But
the next
also we
quarter or
then
the
set
next
in
month.
the next quarter, exactly, yeah. Because a lot of them are long-term changes that they don't happen straight away. They're behavioral change, their mindset change, but then everyone goes off and gets so caught up in the day job, what is often known as business as usual or operations, that they don't have any time to work on any of those projects. And so, like yourself, spending time going, all right, so we've done this strategy, but what is the true capacity? What are we already committed to? What's the employee experience that we're already delivering, and how do we do that? Who works on that? How do they work on that? Then the time that we have remaining, how do we know that we're spending it on the right things and we're going to deliver value? And that could even be just going back to that employee cycle and going, all right, well, at the moment, the way that we onboard people is terrible, is not working. We're losing people in the first 3-6 months. We need to do something there. So it might not be as sexy as, the big leadership program that you wanted to work on, but that's where you've got the biggest pain point. So we now need to. So, but you can only have those kind of discussions if you're taking that true, full holistic viewpoint from the word go. Yeah.
I've got another one for you, Natal, and my accountant won't mind me saying this. My accountant also works a lot on financials, which is good. They're wonderful. But they said to us, at the next meeting, we want to see your vision and goals, but we want to see the Gantt chart for every project you're going to execute throughout the whole year.
Okay.
And I was like,
Excellent.
okay, we'll give you the next quarter, and then we'll give you the vision and goals, and we'll give you the backlog. But we'll give you the quarter, because we're going to learn over each sprint, and then at the end of the quarter.
Totally.
And I'm looking forward to that conversation. I'll see how much they actually go, no, I want the full plan. They're wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it was just such a classic example. I see also where people pack this plan out for the whole year.
Exactly.
And it's like, seriously, is the year going to play out exactly like that? Are you going to learn throughout the way and things are going to change?
Exactly.
Which is where the agile thinking is so important. Natal, this has been an amazing conversation, and we've covered so much turf. I think it's going to be a cracking show I keep listening back to. Big question. What's your 2-minute tip on this area? What would be that 2-minute tip you'd give to someone if you're going up an elevator with them? You've got 2 minutes. What would you say?
Well, from a people and culture and learning and development perspective, mine is understand the value that your people experience is delivering across an organization. So if you've got a people strategy, what problems are you trying to solve with it? How do you know you're solving them, and how are you measuring that value? And by doing that, you'll be able to have the data as to the impact that you're making on the organization.
That's great. So, Natal, you're a constant learner, constantly bring out new ideas and insights for everyone else. But what's been a recent insight for you, a recent aha moment that you've had?
Cool. Well, you've just said the aha moment has led me to think of something that I'm now sharing a lot with teams, and this is the focus on AI. And if we think about the world of learning and also people and culture, it's huge, because there's so many workplace decisions that are potentially getting made with AI. It's already in most learning systems and most HR systems. So a friend from a company called Hive Learning, who I interviewed for the book, and I interviewed quite a few different people, they follow this principle, which is AHA, and it stands for AI assisted, human-led, AI resourced, human checked. And a big part of the book is we looked at how there's a role for learning and development and people and culture professionals to become the editor, not the creator so much anymore. So a lot of learning solutions can be accelerated and designed with AI, but what's the data that's gone in? How have you made choices around it? How is it, have you challenged potential bias that has been built into any algorithm? And so there's even more of a role, and I think quite a specialist skill now, of how do you check the results of an algorithm, and how do you know that is the right decision to make, and how does it impact the human experience? That's a whole new world. And so the AHA principle for me is a nice starting point.
Yeah, Natal, I love it. I love that one. And I had it myself because the first time I used AI was about what you and I spoke about the drumbeat. How do you write me an article on strategic planning and deployment and execution, the rhythms of execution.
Yeah.
And it just came back with some big article about traditional gigantic strategic planning and how to create a great document.
Yeah.
And I was instantly like, whoa, people have got to be careful with AI. Like if you,
exactly,
because it's basically a lot of it's based on volumes and what data's in there, isn't it? So
yes,
you could punch something in and it could really pigeonhole you really fast if you do not have the human checked AI resource. Yeah, the human checked piece, which is massive. I love it.
It is.
Hey, Natal, thank you so much for your time and knowledge and for what you have done and will continue to do. I'm sure there'll be more books and all sorts into the future. But how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more, engage, get some help?
Well, two main ways. One is always connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Natal Dank, I believe, that's on LinkedIn. So I'm quite easy to find. I always love to chat and I always respond to a message. And of course, come over to PXO Culture website, so pxoculture.com, and we do lots of free meetups, lots of community events. We have a fantastic newsletter that only goes out now and then. And so people can learn a lot just by joining our kind of community.
Great, Natal. And understand now you're in Australia at the moment, you're back to Europe, and you potentially be out in Australia a bit more going forward. So if you are in Australia or you are in Europe, of course, and then America's just in the middle, you can reach out to get some help from Natal. So Natal, thank you again.
Anytime.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Natal. Talk soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.
There were two key takeaways for me from this episode. Firstly, the importance of employee experience or journey mapping with a cross-functional team looking holistically at the journey from discovery, like Natal mentioned in the show, right through to they've left the organisation and we retain contact. It's such an important aspect of looking at the whole journey and strategically defining what should we do or what experiments could we run to actually learn and work to actually improve that now. Prioritise that and do it within capacity. The other key takeaway for me was the importance of scaled strategic cadence within organisations, where we have an execution cadence or rhythm of executing an experiment or a cycle of improvement for a project to learn from, and then come back and review and plan the next quarter or the next month, whatever that cadence is. And that goes from frontline teams to maybe the whole of people and culture department to the whole organisation having that strategic cadence. It is so critical to working within capacity and demand, to truly executing, to getting focused, to having a learning organisation where we learn from our recent execution period, to truly getting results, solving problems. Like Natal said, it's the main thing she's involved in. It's one of the main areas I'm involved in to try help companies right now. If you have one of those traditional strategic planning type approaches, really consider this area to help your organisation move forward in the future. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Thanks for helping us create a better future, Natal. Bye for now.